behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
What's going on? Welcome back to the GTM pod. As always, thank you for lending us your eardrums for the next 40 minutes or so. You are certainly in the right spot if you're looking to level up your go-to-market game. If you are building a company, if you are part of the team that is building a company, it's certainly tough times out there right now. So all the help, all the stories, all the tactics, all the strategies that we can get from people that have been in the arena for many, many years are super valuable right now. And very excited to bring on this next guest. I am joined by Adam Schoenfeld. Adam, welcome, man.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Pumped to have you. And so quick bio for the listeners. Currently the co-founder and CEO at Keyplay, also co-founder and analyst at Signal, four-time SaaS founder. Past companies include Siftrock, which was acquired by Drift. And you were a VP of product and strategy at Drift. After that, I think you spent like two and a bit years there, and also a board member at Bizible. I was going to say, I just interviewed Dave Gerhardt for the last episode that should be dropping before this one. Did you two work pretty closely at Drift?
We did. He left before I did. But I remember my very first exec offsite in Vermont and, spending a lot of time with him. He was great. He had great energy. So I'm going to definitely listen to that episode.
Yeah, it was a good one. We even got a guest appearance from his daughter, Annie, which was fun. It was cool. But man, there's so many areas I want to take this conversation, and I'm excited to hear, your story of building companies and some of the trials and tribulations that come with that. But before we get there, I think you have built Keyplay using what I think is going to be the new B2B playbook. And I've seen this play out in the B2C realm. A lot of people out there are building followings on Instagram or other social platforms, and then listening to that audience and just serving them what they want, whether it is a swimsuit brand or it is a, coffee brand, whatever it is. And those businesses are able to literally overnight grow insanely quickly. And it seems like B2B is always a little bit behind on certain strategies. But you actually built the audience first with Signal and then bolted on Keyplay as a platform. Walk me through the thinking behind that and how you ultimately executed.
Yeah, I think you're right that this is coming along slower in B2B. And I know you funded Anthony and Audience Plus and JK. They're really pushing this story. And so I encourage people to read their point of view on this. But the idea of building a media company either inside or in parallel to or around your SaaS company, however you want to think about the relationship, it's a really powerful idea. And whether it's audience building, community building, I think people get a little lost in the words and the definitions, but to me, all that kind of blends together in some form. And it's you want to get out there and get in that community of people that you seek to serve and create content, participate in some way. And that's super valuable if you can do that as a little startup. If you can do that ahead of product development or in tandem with product development, you can capture a ton of insight about what to build. You can sort of precede your early customers. You can build sort of an asset with an audience that has long-term compounding value. And so with Keyplay, I didn't actually know that I wanted to build Keyplay. I knew I wanted to serve sales and marketing folks because that's the domain I'd been in. And I wanted to stay in my circle of competence in the Charlie Munger framework, right, in my next startup. So I knew that, but I didn't know like what problem I wanted to solve. I felt like there were so many problems. I was interviewing people on different ideas. And I said, okay, the thing to do here is to just get in the community, create content, kind of stay in the game. Like I didn't want to just disappear for a year and do customer development interviews. And so back in September of 2021, I'd had like a month off after Drift. And I had the luxury of time. Like I will say that. So I had the luxury of time and kind of being able to build it up this way. Um, I started studying PLG, product led growth companies, and I created a little Airtable data set and I started a newsletter. And I just started getting into a weekly cadence of publishing and like curating this data set. And you could like sign up and you could get full access to the Airtable. And then you were like getting the newsletter every week. And so it was really just the desire to get out there and start that way, thinking that, okay, if I do this in time, this will lead me to a SaaS business. Because ultimately, I wanted to get back to another SaaS business. That's what I'd been doing. So that was the genesis of it. I wish I could say I knew the master plan of like, A will lead to B to C, but it was more like I think this generally is a solid approach. I'd seen elements of that really work at Drift. Back in my days at Simply Measured, we had done sort of a flavor of this. Not exactly, we had products first. And so I wanted to take that mindset of like community first, audience building, creating content at the onset, even before I knew like what customer problem I wanted to solve with software.
I love that breakdown. So one of the tricky pieces to this and where this can break down is how did you transition your first like initial design partners or people that you identified within the community that cared about your content, and then you have to make this dance of could we get them to care about this product, this platform, this software? How did that actually tactically go?
Well, we haven't figured it out, I'll say. I think we're in the figuring it out stage. So now we have this great audience. We have 17,000 subscribers. We get all this engagement. 50% of people open our weekly newsletter. We get tons of replies to the email. We get tons of people like submitting companies to Peer Signal where they're like, hey, track my company. They're like, so we have all this like two-way engagement. We have all this audience. And we get a ton of insight from it, but we haven't really figured out how to connect that to the ARR growth of Keyplay in an efficient way. Now it does loosely connect, right? Because that's the answer to your question, which was the people who really cared when we just put out a little bit of an inkling about what we're trying to do or the problem we're trying to solve, we got inbound. And that's where the first design partners, first paying customers came from. They came inbound, they just would email me or reply to the newsletter and say, hey, like this stuff you're doing over here with Peer Signal, it seems like you might have some more capabilities that could maybe help me with this account selection problem I have or this ABM problem I have. And then we would dig in from there. So it came very organically inbound. Now, how do we turn that into like a predictable, consistent go-to-market motion? I don't know yet. We're still trying to figure that out. And we want to be careful because we don't want to like just go the opposite way and like turn the audience off, because we've been delivering them some value, which is in the form of this research and this content, and it's not tied to the software that we actually sell.
I feel like that playbook's kind of just being written right now. And I think my hunch and some of the stuff we did at Outreach is it might not be overly scalable. Like you don't want to actually bake it into the content. You don't want to start like, pimping out that audience that you've carefully curated. It might just be that like one-to-one, very pointed, you see this person engaging more than most. They seem to have a problem that you're solving for. And, it's that one-to-one reach out and saying, hey, this is a problem that we're currently working on, would love your input on it. And then hopefully that leads to some interest, down the line.
Totally. It's really messy because we did it as two brands even, right? Because we didn't know what Keyplay was going to be. So Pure Signal was just sort of named and created for the charter that it had, which was to publish useful research to help go-to-market leaders like study the craft. And that's kind of orthogonal to what we're doing at Keyplay. Now they share an underlying capability set, which is like collecting and cleaning, curating, and drawing intelligence out of this data. So I think that's one way that we have connected it successfully is when we do research in Pure Signal that highlights capabilities of Keyplay, that sort of naturally provokes curiosity. Like, oh, I wonder how they're like crawling job posts to understand which technology is being adopted by RevOps people or something, right? Like that might lead you down to look at Keyplay if you're, if you have sort of a different problem that's top of mind. But we don't have a great way to like spark that. It has to. Right now, it's just happening organically, and so I think we have to like test and try things and figure out what the right way is to make that to make that work without ruining the good thing that we built.
And I think the idea of two brands seems to be the way to do it, or else the waters get too messy. There seems like too much of a conflict of interest. I think the trust factor goes down a little bit if it's associated too much with a software company. What would your advice be? Because Pure Signal, you said 17,000 subscribers. That's like it's no easy feat to do. If I'm a software founder, I'm listening to this and thinking about building a media arm or a community arm. What were some of your learnings? Anything you'd kind of do differently?
I guess that one of the things I did at the start is I tried to make things very overly structured. So I was like, I need this newsletter and this content to follow a very prescribed format so that it's repeatable. And at one point, I was like finding that it would kind of work, and then it would like engagement would sort of decline as I kept repeating the format. And I was obsessed with tweaking the format. Right. And then I just said, you know what, this is dumb. And I was also obsessed with consistency and all these like things that are around that are they're sort of on the edge. They're not the core. And at one point I said, you know what I need to do is just every Thursday I just need to like give the world the best insight I have from the data or from my experiences or the intersection of those things. And you know what, if on a Thursday I don't have one, then I'm just gonna not do it as well. So I also kind of gave myself some permission, and that was a big unlock. And then that helped me discover the formats that would work because I was too obsessed with like trying to create a system, and I hadn't yet found, I guess, product market fit for our content business at that point. Like we had a few thousand subscribers maybe early, but I needed to get there. So I think that was a big like moment. And so I think kind of keeping flexible and just always focusing on, hey, who am I trying to serve? What are they going to care about? And like, what's the best thing I can give them that's unique? That has helped me a lot.
I think that's a great insight and something we actually saw as well as we were building out the GTM newsletter. I went through almost the exact same thing. I would be like, overly structured. This is how it looks. We're going to do 3 sections. And then we'll have a what did you learn section, and we're going to break it all down. And A, it got exhausting. B, yeah, people like over time engagement kind of like dropped. And now it's just about delivering the best content that we possibly can. And sometimes that's a form of a Q&A series or highlighting things on the podcast or just whatever the best thing that we can drive is, and like not be so obsessed with format. I think that's great content advice. All right, man. Switching gears a little bit, and we talked a little bit before we turned on the mics, and I'm super excited to hear this story. And so I'll just flip it over to you and tell us about one of the most impactful stories that you've gone throughout your career. Maybe one that you haven't widely shared, and we'll kind of wrestle with what you learned from the experience, what you did right, and what you did wrong.
Yeah, it's always good to open up these old wounds with you, Scott.
I'll charge for the therapy session.
Making me feel comfortable with your exposed brick in the background.
Just lull you into a false sense of security and then just hit you with it. Let's get the goods.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned I'm a 4-time founder. I'm not one of these people that just figured it out really young and just Mark Zuckerberg'd it or something, and I still think I'm very much figuring it out, right? Like I think that's what keeps me going is just trying to trying to evolve and grow. And that's why I keep wanting to do this. So 2 companies previously, you mentioned like my last startup, Siftrock, we bootstrapped and then sold to Drift. And before that, I started a company called Simply Measured, and we just skyrocketed from 0 to 10 million ARR. It was actually really hard getting to like 100K of ARR, but then once we did that, we were off to the races. I was really young. My co-founders were really young. We were in our 20s. And at 10, we started to really like hit the wall. I mean, we had tons of headwinds in the market. Like our space changed a bunch. I don't need to go into the details of it, but that happened. But the really painful part there for me was I just kind of fell over like as CEO. 150 people and, this business that's kind of in this 10 to 20. Now I got to do the 10 to 20 year. We raised a Series C at a very high valuation. And, I did made so many classic mistakes. I like the big thematic thing I think was I let go of a lot of things that had got us there, which is a hard one because you hear a lot of advice that's like, what got you here won't get you there. Isn't that the title of the book?
I think so.
Okay. So,
I've heard it like true. A million different, almost like every ELT meeting, someone brings that up. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of truth to it, but there's also a balance to it, right? Which is I kind of like try to become a different person. I sort of like lost track of my identity as a founder, my relationships with my co-founders, my connection to the customer. And so that was like very formative because I got to sort of see, like, I got to feel the success of that early stage energy, customer centricity, like bringing the right people together and how amazing it can be to just grow like the way we did from 0 to 10 million. And then I like over rotate on trying to professionalize and grow up myself and follow the sort of playbook. And I think like if I could do it over again, I would have stuck much more to like what's my identity and like really like gone deep into the values and the people that I wanted to have around. So that was a really good experience. I hope I get the chance with Keyplay to like experience that phase again and sort of approach it as a 40-something-year-old and see if I can like apply those lessons.
Yeah, I think that's the tough thing about starting a company so young is like you're still figuring out your own identity, and then you have all of these people now looking at you, and you have like almost all these mirrors on you, and you're still trying to figure out who you are, who that reflection is, and you're trying to grow up and keep up this pace of this insane growth. Who was it that you thought you had to become? You mentioned like more professional. What was that sort of vision in your head? Who did you try and become that ultimately didn't work?
I thought I had to become this executive that kind of knew all of the answers. And I think that's different than being the founder and being the one that's out there with the customers and has a lot of creative energy and is sort of like scrappy and figuring it out. I should have thought more about how to bring in executives and admitted that I was not that, right? Now, I don't know now at this point in my career if I want to try to be that. Like if Keyplay gets to 100 plus people, that's where I really think the break point is. Somewhere around maybe 80 to 100 people, you're getting that maybe 3-layer org chart, and you really have to like have that true you need executives that can hire and recruit and retain people and structure their teams and do operational planning and all this stuff. And I thought I just needed to like snap into that. And I thought I needed to like spend my time like running the ELT and being at the board level. And so I pulled myself out of a lot of the things that gave me energy, which was like being with customers and getting in on like the next exciting product feature or, spending time with my co-founders, just kind of like going wherever we were needed. So that was what I thought. I had to like snap into this picture of an executive, which I don't even think that that's true in startups because now I know that you can see successful executives that look a lot of different ways, but I kind of extrapolated things I was hearing from my board or things I was reading. And it took me down a path that was not that was not right generally, and definitely wasn't right for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is the Dunbar's number? 150. So maybe that's where it starts breaking down. Maybe it's a little bit before that, where things start
I
getting.
feel like that's a really key point. And like I talked to, or like when you raise at 9 figures, or like, there's like these things that just they're like really big, like, oh gosh, it just got real. So whenever I'm talking to founders that are like kind of in those zones, like they just raised that big round, or they just crossed that, 120, 150 people, I'm like, let me tell you like a few of the things I messed up, and maybe I can be a cautionary tale. I think that's a big difference. Like you don't, I think you could probably maintain a startup ethos, but you aren't like that 20-person team.
So summarizing some of the learnings there. So it was, focus on things that give you energy. I heard that, not try and put on any sort of fake persona. You have to, be you. And that's what the team is going to draw their energy from. Focus on, hiring. You can go find people who have the answers. You don't have to have all the answers. What else did you learn from that time period?
I think the co-founder relationships, we all kind of we spread out. We were all just right there together doing it in the early days, and then we kind of spread out and took our spots, and then we weren't tight. We weren't sort of. I actually saw this at Drift. So I think the advice I was like, oh, the executive team needs to run the company, right? This was kind of the thought I had at Simply Measured, was like, the executive team needs to run the company. At Drift, I felt like David and Elias ran the company. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I felt like they were, as the founders, they were like, they were a different group than the most senior leadership team. Now, it may have evolved as they scaled more after I wasn't there. I don't know. I wasn't in the C level. I was, I was layered down, but I felt like they did a really good job of kind of keeping that. They were like locked into gear, talking all the time. My co-founders and I, we kind of spread out. We should have probably been more joined at the hip on just everything, right? Like culture and product and strategy and just all those things, right? I think there's so much power in like the co-founders. Like when you have a dynamic that where it's 1+1 is 3 or some stupid adage like that, but to lean into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you encourage founders to do that, is kind of not embed themselves so much in the executive day to day, but more give themselves space to think, bigger picture and see the whole, the forest behind the trees, I guess is the analogy.
I think it depends on who you are and what you get energy from. But for me and for that group at that stage in our lives and our careers, I think we would have been better served by just acting more like we did earlier on, like being kind of together on everything instead of like, oh, you go run this function, I go run this function, you hire that person, I hire that person, you go work on this fire, I'll work on that fire. You got to do that, right? You do have to divide and conquer. But I think earlier on, it was just we knew everything. We were all in the weeds. And so I think we just over rotated, right? There's some balance, and maybe you have somebody on your founding team who's like, they're going to be the VP of sales to run the 100-person sales team, and then that's what they want to do, and then that would be great. But I think we were all more generalists, and we were all more founder people than we were kind of proven operators. And that, I think for that group, that was we over rotated to try to skill up in areas that we thought we needed to, rather than just, leverage our strengths.
And you also mentioned something there earlier on about kind of losing track of the customer. What did that look like at the time, and how are you doing things, differently now at Keyplay?
Well, in the early stage, I think it's easy as the founder to be in deep with the customer, because like you're closing the first design partners or early access, whatever it is. You're monitoring every customer like it's your life, right? At least that's how I am. And as you get bigger, right now you have CSMs and AEs and or not, but you're like less connected to each and every customer. And I like way over rotated, right? Like I stopped going to any customer meetings. I stopped having direct relationships with customers other than just a few times if I was like needed to be brought in for a particular purpose. And so I think that I will preserve that much longer. I'll preserve that forever at Keyplay because I think it's just so important to have a direct line. All this call recording stuff has made it a little easier because you can async catch up on what's going on, but I still think nothing beats just jumping on to a call or texting, having a good like back and forth via text with a customer. And so I think I got to the point where I was like, I would go weeks and I was like, geez, I haven't talked to any customers. And I think that's just bad practice.
I look at my time at Outreach and working with Manny. I'd like to think roughly like 50% of the things on Manny's calendar are customer facing. Like, they're just jumping on demos and like, it's pretty wild. He definitely made that a huge focus, and then, made him such a better leader because he was able to relay that voice of the customer to the entire organization, that enthusiasm, that excitement.
I love that. Man, he's so great. I mean, it makes sense like with his energy that he would do that. Yeah.
Sustained energy too. That's the mind-blowing thing. He's been at it for a while now and still got it. I love it, man. All right. Thank you for sharing that time period. Hopefully it didn't put too much salt in the old wounds.
It's all good. We all have our ups and downs. I mean, it's funny because from that experience, I got so much out of it, and a lot of people that were involved got a lot out of it. You have these gray area things that you do, right? They're not big wins and they're not big losses. Like they have, if you look at it in different dimensions, like a lot of the people that worked on that team have gone on to do amazing things. The core assets of the company, like, is integrated into Sprout Social and is part of what they do. So it's so interesting. It's such a formative experience and had so many great people involved too.
I found in my own life that given enough time and space, almost everything that I perceived as tough or bad ends up being kind of a net positive, whether it's through growth or learnings or connection with other people. I think there's very, very little kind of black and white, bad and good. It's kind of like it's what you learn from it. All right, I want to go to a founder question because I like this one, and I think you're the perfect person to answer it, given what we just talked about, because it's very, very similar story. Didn't blow past 10 yet, but the question is: our first 250K ARR came somewhat easily, but the path to 1 million has been a slog. Any tips and tricks to get us past the 1 million mark?
So some of this depends on what your go-to-market model is. But I think a lot of times that sticking point is like you have the founder doing sales, or maybe you have one AE and you haven't figured out how to replicate it. And so I think when we went from in that phase at Simply Measured, or even at Siftrock, we did cross one. I think it was more about repeating what was working than like fundamentally changing. So I think it was more about kind of like deeply inspecting, like, okay, from those 250, who are really the best customers? Or from the 250 to 1 million, what were the tactics and strategies that were working, and trying to double down on those. I don't think that next level was too much, in my experience, about like expanding a lot of surface area. Honestly, it wasn't like new markets, new segments, things like that. Because if you got to 1 million, like, people are buying it. There's a problem, there's a need. And so I think it's more about trying to repeat really get down to what was working. What's the center of the bullseye on ICP, or on like the channel that really works. Like, can you just do more of that thing? I think that was a lot in my experiences. I mean, I'm sure there's different situations, but I think a lot of times people are like, oh, now I need to like layer in more channels, more things, more activities. I think that probably comes later. I think you can probably go 1 to 10 with like kind of the playbook from 0 to 1. I don't know if you have a take on this too, Scott, because you get to see a lot of companies going through this right now.
No, I think it's great advice. It's almost like don't try and reinvent the wheel, and the advice almost sounds stupidly simple when you say it, but it's just, really take the time, get all the people around the table who are decision makers at your organization, part of the executive team, do a deep postmortem on all the deals that you've closed, exactly how it was sourced. What did the process look like? Who is involved from your side? Who is involved from their side? What was the actual pain? What language were they using? And like go ridiculously detailed, because at 250, I don't know how many deals that is, but it's probably not that many. You can probably dissect all of them. And then you look for the common overlap areas that keep showing up. And then you go and you try and find someone that looks exactly like the target, and you run the exact play, that works. And, someone explained it to me way back in the day, as sort of like it's like a growing tree, right? And you don't try and like, just create a new branch out of nothing. You like just follow the branch until that branch, runs out. And that can be an industry, that can be a persona. Um, and then the last thing I'll say is, if you've got happy customers, you can ask for referrals, and those work well, extremely well.
I think it's probably almost never a TAM problem also.
Yeah, totally.
It's like a lot of founders want to think it's a TAM problem. They're like, oh, it's a TAM problem. But like, I remember David Cancel at Drift, people would bring up this TAM problem question in the tens of millions, and he'd be like, it's not a TAM problem. Like, this was in the tens of millions. I don't know exactly where it was, but he's like, it's not a TAM problem. Like, I don't want to hear that. It's something else, And if you're at a million, like, it's not a TAM problem as well. I would say most likely. I mean, and we just had this experience. I wrote about this in the investor update I just sent you, but it's like I think we were holding on too much to things from last year in our pricing model, and we lowered our entry point 2 months ago, and it had a dramatic impact on like our ability to close deals. And so I think also when you're doing that like inspection, it's like, well, was there something you didn't want to do, but you didn't really have a great reason? Like for me, it was I didn't want to lower the entry price. I was like, okay, well, but customers are like pushing on that margin, and we seem to be losing a lot of deals kind of like right in that zone. So let's try lowering the entry price. I think there's also maybe things like that where it's not like a change to what we do or the problem we solve or who it's for. It's just like a tactical pricing change.
Yeah. Yeah. Challenge those assumptions that were made or formulated in 0% interest rate, completely different time, those days are gone. So you do have to view all of these best practices, don't budge on price. All that. It's like, no, that was a different time. So I think that's a really good call out. I feel like we have to challenge everything right now. It feels like the whole playbook was built for a different time. So I think that would be also some advice, is just go in.
But a lot of the problems are still there.
Exactly.
It's just the customer now is on a budget freeze and a hiring freeze in a lot of cases, or they're just being really rigorous about every new vendor. But like the problem that you were solving and people were paying money for last year still exists. And so like it's kind of like, how can you tweak and tune so that you can fit into the world as it is today?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right. This brings us to our final two questions. Again, I always keep these the same. They are intentionally vague for a reason, so you can take them anywhere you want. This first one is kind of, again, it's challenging assumptions. So what is one thing that revenue leaders or founders believe to be true that you think is bullshit, or it's no longer relevant or serving us?
I don't know if a lot of founders believe this now, but I think there are a number of revenue leaders that still buy into this strategy, which is the kind of old way of gating content and distributing that gated content. It just strikes me as being so outside of the way anybody wants to engage or buy. And what I mean by that is you make a PDF and you put it behind a big old form and you call it an ebook or white paper or the ultimate guide to whatever. You buy a bunch of content syndication, and then people fill out fake information to get that thing. I think it's fairly insane when you actually think about it from the buyer's perspective. I I think gating in the form of like having people sign up for a free product or come into like some cool experience where you can access like lots of content or courses or premium content. I think gating in the sense of, hey, you have to sign up or you have to come behind the wall makes a lot of sense. But I think that traditional, just like transactional trade your information for a PDF is like probably not something I would buy into today.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. We were talking about this before the pod. I can't remember the last time I signed up for an ebook, even way back in the day when it was just like super common practice. I don't think I read any of them. I just had a folder in my email with, 50 ebooks that I would read one day. And it's just not that strong of intent. I remember, running BD teams back in the day, and we'd have like ebook leads, and they're like, man, I just wanted to read this ebook. I don't even know what your product does. I don't really care. It's like this kind of fundamental bait and switch, which just feels like almost dishonest. It's very strange. And then let alone these like big syndication platforms where you like create an ebook and then you pay this company to push it out to this like huge email list. They don't even know your company name, and then you get all these like strangely Gmail leads. Agreed. That's a dead motion. What do you think is replacing that motion? Just super high quality, ungated content that builds brand awareness?
As well as I think like interested, like really compelling reasons to sign up for, like, I think Substack is great, right? Because you can read it, but then they sort of present you with the sign up first. And so I think experiences like that where it's like, oh, hey, come here and get some recurring value or some premium value to be a member. I feel like that like idea of membership or signing up more so than just this, like you put in all this information and then you get this weird nurture thing after that just makes a big assumption about you versus like signing up to like get interesting, useful stuff from creators you care about. Now that I think that could come in lots of forms. I think a hybrid of technology and content is really interesting in that too. Like tools, content, like I think that all this stuff, the lines are going to blur. And I think that's where you can really get some really cool experiences.
Yeah, that's got my head going. It feels like the new ebook is actually like a lightweight freemium tool, and it's like, it's instead of reading about solving your problem, it's like this little tool will solve your problem, and people will give their information for that.
Yes, I think that's a great one. And then I think you can cut and package your content in so many great zero-click ways into social channels and everything that like you can get a lot more engagement out of everything you produce than spending all this time on this one PDF and then like only the people who fill out that form get to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. But then marketing doesn't get their MQLs. What are we going to do, man?
I know. Well, you got to solve that problem somehow.
Yes. Yes. All right. Final question from me is, this question kind of flipped on its head. What's one tactic or strategy that is working for you today that founders or revenue leaders can implement that will, immediately move the needle or at least trend it in the right direction?
Yeah, this it's a big one, but I think having some free version or trial is so huge. And even if you don't think your product is quite right for it or your buyer isn't quite right for it, like I don't think like we don't have a Loom or a Notion or a highly collaborative or a viral solution. Like we have more of a something that's sold to, rev ops or managers in marketing, that it's more centralized. And so we don't have like the traditional PLG dynamic, but we're just learning so much, and it creates such a good healthy dynamic to have something that people can sign up for and use. Like we figured out how to down package Keyplay into something that you can sign up for and instantly kind of get a preview on. We get so much product feedback. We get a ton of leads. We get a ton of like, we just have every day people are signing up, which is such a great feeling if you've been used to like a slower sales led model. And so I just encourage people to think critically about what can you open up, even if it's not your whole solution. Maybe you're vertical SaaS and you've got like a really niche market and it's like complex. Maybe you're the extreme opposite of traditional PLG. Still think there's probably some slice of what you do that you can put out into the world, and you can get a lot of the value of that, people interacting at a very high clip and getting a lot of learning.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's incredibly common that I hear kind of incumbents or mid growth stage companies just be like, oh no, like PLG doesn't work for us. Freemium won't work for us. It's like, I feel like it would take a day to just sit down and like really think of like, okay, it doesn't have to solve the whole problem, but like when they come to us, what is that initial thing that they're solving? And you can build some lightweight tool that like time to value is immediate.
It is hard to get over that if you're in the sales, if you're in this either an inbound or an outbound led, demo request, discovery, demo, contract motion, because you're like, I got to put all my effort to like getting more through that. And so I think it took us, like, we had to push ourselves, just like, let's get out there. And like, maybe there's parts of our product that won't work so well in this, but we just did it. And I think it's ultimately going to serve us well, because now we've taken that step, and now we can iterate and figure out what the long-term version of that is. Like, I don't think we've totally nailed it, but we have something that people are signing up for every day. We've had over 1,000 people sign up. We've got tons of feedback. We've had some of those people convert. And then the thing that surprised me most was a ton of people who come in for a demo request, then after that go sign up for the free product and play around with it. And so it's like it plays into the sales process in all kinds of different ways. And I think we're going to just learn so much by having it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. You could even send it to the people that go dark after a demo request, hey, play around with it yourself. Yeah, it's just another tool for engagement. Awesome. Well, Adam, this has been super fun. Thanks for sharing your story, some of your learnings. Always appreciate someone who shares a story that isn't all sunshine and rainbows. I think we learn the most from those tough times. And if listeners want to, follow along with more of your content, Pure Signal. What's the name of the newsletter again?
It's just Pure Signal, puresignal.org. Funny enough, the .org. And then I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. I post regularly.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, Adam. And to all those listeners, thanks for hanging out with us. As I always say, listening is one thing, executing is everything. Take some of these lessons, some of these stories, and apply them to your business. And we will see you next week.